Good morning. I'm so happy to be here. I haven't had a chance to do this in a while, actually, and it's just a wonderful privilege to be able to take God's Word and really get into it and then try to explain what it means to a group of people. And I hope that what I say here today are not my words, like Pastor Steve said, but I hope that what you're hearing is what's from God. And I hope that you're going to take this and don't just hear it this morning, but take it home, mull over it, and try to put it into practice, because that's what it's all about. One of the awesome things about the way that Paul writes enables us to really figure out how to put things into practice. In the first 3 chapters, which we just finished, Paul has this way of just writing. He goes, doctrine, application. Doctrine, application. He does that in almost all of his books. Not everyone, but he does that in almost all of his books. So he spends the whole beginning of his letters writing doctrine to the people that he's writing to. This is stuff that you need to know. And then he spends the second half of the letters, or the last part of the letter, saying, this is how you do it. So in chapter 4, we begin that application section that Paul has. And so we've been talking about how to live for God here in Timothy. We've been talking about how a leader of the church has to live for God. Well, now we're going to talk about, exactly how we do that. What things are going to be in the way of doing that at the beginning of chapter 4, and what's important to do. So, really, the easiest title you can put on this chapter is beware of false teaching. There will always be a problem that we face with false teachers. People will come and tell you that what you know is good. What you know is good. This Bible that you have is an excellent tool. It has very good information, but you just need a little more. There's lots of people that will come and tell you that you've got this is good, but you're just missing this one thing. And if you get this one thing, you'll be set. You'll be perfect. You'll be ready to serve God to the fullest of your ability. As it turns out, God makes it very clear in His Word that there is no one extra thing. This is all we need to live for God. Right here. Everything that we need to live for God is possessed in this book. If you have this book, you have all the instructions you need to live for God. But there will be people that will make a point of telling you there's this one thing that you need to add. Think of some specific examples. Jehovah's Witnesses will tell you that this Bible is an excellent tool. But you need their writings as well, because they have other information that is not possessed in this Bible that you need to serve God. That's not good. That's false teaching. That's something you have to be aware of and on guard for. And so Paul knows when he's writing to Timothy that's going to be happening to Timothy. He's over in Ephesus. He's in a Gentile country, and the Gentiles have all sorts of different religions, and these people are going to come in and they're going to tell you, what your religion says sounds good, but you need to add this to it or that to it, or you need to take this away or take that away. We can't do that. We can't do that as Christians. We can't take away from the Bible and we can't add to it. This is all that we need. So we have to beware of false teaching. And he begins right in the first verses by warning Timothy, a pastor of a church, that there are people in his congregation that will not continue to follow God. That's a definite. There's people that you know that are Christians right now, or that have been going to church with you all your life. There's people that will fall away, that will stop following God. Because it's inevitability. We have weak hearts without God, and we're easily led astray. So let's read the first couple verses, and I'll talk about it. Now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons. Through the insincerity of liars whose consciences are seared, who forbid marriage and require abstinence from foods that God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. So we have to know that not everyone will continue to follow God. He makes it clear right there. Some will depart from the faith. Well, why will some depart from the faith? Probably not because they have the information and they don't want to use it. It's probably because they're going to get extra information. Some will devote themselves to evil spirits. Well, there are people out in the world that will tell you that it is okay to kill someone for religious beliefs. There are people out in the world that will tell you that it is necessary to keep away from the things that God has given us, to stay away from God's creation, some of the things that are really important to experience in life the way that God wanted us to. I believe earnestly that these people are being deceived by evil spirits. I believe that Satan has all sorts of workers in this world that are trying to convince every one of us that what God says is not true. You see that from the beginning of time. You see that right in Genesis. At the beginning, Satan comes in and he goes to Eve, right? It says, what did God tell you about this fruit? And Eve says, well, he said that you can't eat of it or touch of it. And then Satan says, did he really say that? That's not what he said, is it? We have evil spirits in this world that are telling us that are going to directly contradict the word of God that we have. And we have to be aware of it. We have to make sure that we are on guard for that. And Paul wants Timothy, as the young pastor of this church, to really make a point of putting his members on guard for that. Back then, you would have things like, you would have the Greek myths, the Greek gods. You would have these Gnostics that would come in and they would tell you, well, everything has two meanings. If you read something, you have to read in between the lines because there's a secret meaning to everything. They would have Judaizers coming in and saying, not only do you need the gospel, but you also need to be circumcised. That's part of becoming a covenant member of God's community. All that stuff is not true. And Paul knew that, but it sounds plausible. It sounds reasonable. If all through the Old Testament the Jewish people had to get circumcised to become part of God's covenant, why did it change? It seems very plausible to the people that are hearing it. Well, yeah, I should probably be circumcised. It just seems like that's what you do when you become one of God's children. Well, that's not. That's not what saves you. That's not what saving faith has to have. Neither do you have to read between the lines. There's no secret messages in the Bible. You don't have to get so deep into it that you miss the meaning that's right before you. You don't have to see a series of numbers and realize that all of the numbers in the Bible will come out to a special equation, and if you know that special equation, you're ready for heaven or something like that. There's no secret messages in here. It's clear and it's to be understood. So there's no reading between the lines. And that's something that people were being taught back then. And something that, which is sad to say, something that's still taught today in various areas. People will tell you all the time that there's secret messages in the Bible. And there's these things that you have to find if you just look a little deeper. And they're not there. God didn't give us his word to confuse us. He gave his word to us that we would get clarity and understanding. So, as you go on, some will follow the teachings of demons. I think that's very much related to the teachings of evil spirits. I think that's essentially the same thing. But if you want to look at some people today that might follow the teaching of demons, Satanists, if you think of that witchcraft and stuff that people partake in, people are doing it today, people were doing it back then. That's stuff to be avoided. It's dangerous, it's scary to begin with, and it's of no use to you as a Christian. It's not going to help you in your relationship with God. And ultimately, that's what it all comes down to. Every day we have to be thinking, how is my relationship with God today? How is it improving? How am I growing closer to God? Because that's what we're trying to do. And that's what Paul is going to conclude in this passage. It also says that they will be misled by liars. This is the easiest way to get misled. Like I was talking before, the Gnostics, the Judaizers, they come in and they lie to you. They lie to your face. They say, what you have is wrong, or it's not quite right. And they're wrong. And they just want you to become part of whatever they have. So you have to be careful of it. And these people are dangerous, dangerous people. I can think of some today that are important leaders in America that have some of even the biggest churches that you'll ever see. These people are straight liars. If they claim to have a degree in the Bible, the stuff that they say is outrageous. They'll take entire sections of the Bible and leave them out. They'll never preach them. They'll never talk about them. There's people today that will not talk about hell. They'll say that hell does not even exist. There are pastors that will actually tell you that there's no such thing as hell. The Bible, Jesus talks a lot about hell, about the dangers of disobeying God, that there's punishment for our actions, that we're responsible. And there's people today that will tell you, well, you can't focus on that stuff, or you can't even talk about that stuff because that just creates negative energy. It doesn't help at all. It doesn't help your faith. It doesn't help you get closer to God. They're liars. And to do that, to lie like that, when you know that it's true, you have a seared conscience, it says. You have no conscience. It's terrible. Paul was already talking about this at the beginning of Timothy, of this book. In 1 Timothy 5, he says, the aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. These are the people that have the opposite of what we're trying to seek and to have. We're trying to have a good conscience, heart of love. These people have no love for you. They have love for fame or fortune or something, but they have no love for God's family. They have no love for God's children. And they have no conscience. It's unconscionable to know the truth and to then go and tell someone the exact opposite. To know that Jesus is the only way to heaven, and then to go and tell people that that's not the case. That's unconscionable. That's terrible. These people also forbid marriage. Marriage is an institution created by God. It was intended for most of God's people. To forbid marriage is to say that God was wrong from the beginning. Because he saw Adam, and the first time that God ever said something was not good was when he saw that Adam was alone. And he created a wife for him. And then he said it was good. Marriage is not to be avoided, it's to be enjoyed by God's people and by his children. And not everyone was intended to be married, but those of us that were intended to be married, to deny that to ourselves because some people told us it's wrong, that's not following God the way that you should. That's taking God's will for your life taking out a huge chunk of it, of his plans for